to the second of 3 presentations in the ALCTS Annual 2013 Online Pre-Conference, Loan Agreements for Exhibit Materials. I'm Jessica Phillips, host of today's pre-conference. Today's presentation is Conservation and Preservation Issues with Tonia Grafakos. Tonia is the Conservation Librarian at Northwestern University Library. She holds a master's degree in Library and Information Science with a certificate in conservation from the University of Texas in Austin. If you have questions for the presenter, please type them into the question box on your screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Also, please note today's session will be recorded, and you will receive an email with a link to the recording shortly after the conclusion of the webinar. A copy of the slides will also be provided. You are invited to use the Twitter hashtag ALCTS to interact with other participants during the webinar. However, please continue to submit questions for the presenters using the question box on the screen, as neither the presenters nor the host will monitor Twitter during the presentation. Please note that there may be a slight delay as I turn the presentation over to Tonia.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about the conservation and preservation issues in exhibiting materials. The loan could be to a library or museum down the street or overseas. The process is the same. For those of you who don't know me, this is just a slide so you can put a face to the disinvited voice coming through your computer. The topics that we will cover today include the examination of the object with the idea, is it suitable for loan? How to evaluate a facilities report, preservation recommendations including light levels, temperature and humidity, conservation recommendations including condition reports, treatment reports, mounts, and other items you may want to consider. Ideally, a conservator on staff will examine the object that will be lent to determine if it is stable to travel and be exhibited. The conservator will notify the curator or the registrar of any risks that may be involved. They will look at things like, is the item stable? Does it need conservation work prior to exhibition? Can it withstand the stress of travel? Does it have ownership marks? When the conservator is looking at an object, they should have as many details as possible about the exhibit, including appropriate information such as page opening if the item is a book. They will check to see if the book can be opened to that page. Is there a restricted opening? For instance, can a book be only opened to 90 degrees without stressing the binding, or can it be opened to 120 degrees? How will your object be exhibited? Is it going to be in a wall case, in a floor case? If it's paper or a photograph, does it need to be mounted? Is there a particular color for the mat? This information will help the conservator determine the suitability of an object and advise on the appropriate mounts. How to evaluate a facilities report. Each report can be organized under 8 basic headings. The borrower section has information on the personnel at the institution and their contact information. The building has information on when the building was constructed, the dates of any renovations or additions, what the building is constructed of. Is it brick, stone, wood? Is there any construction going to be happening during the time of your exhibit? What types of delivery areas do they have? Is there an enclosed loading dock? Is it an open area? Are you going to be offloading in the street or in an enclosed secure area? From experience, I've couriered objects under all of these circumstances. If you are offloading on a side street, it's not necessarily a problem if there is additional security present. It's always good to know the conditions that your object will be subjected to. It's also good to know if they have a freight elevator on site and whether or not your object is going to be on the first floor, second, or third. For the fire suppression system, is there a fire suppression system? Where is it located? Is it going to be in your exhibit area? Is it going to be in their storage area? What kind do they have? Wet pipe, dry pipe, delayed action? Other things that may be included are, where is the nearest fire hydrant, the fire station, the police station? For security, where is the item going to be stored prior to its installation? Is it going to be in the gallery or is it going to be in a vault? What kind of security is available in the museum? Are there cameras? Is there camera in the room that your item will be in? Are there security personnel on staff? Will someone be staffing the room that your object is in, or will their security staff be roaming? What type of security is in the library or museum when it is closed? How are your objects going to be secured? Do they have a locked and alarmed vitrine? Are there security screws and plates installed on large hanging objects? As you can see, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered in these types of facility reports. For your environment, what is the temperature and RH in that area? They should give you a temperature and RH reading for each season. The readings will fluctuate depending on what the season is. For most objects, the RH should be somewhere between 40 and 45%. For temperature, somewhere between 68 and 72 degrees. RH can be modified with silica gels in the cases. What are their light levels? What types of lights are used? Is there a window in that area? Is there food being served on the premises and where? If so, what is their housekeeping like? For the handling of the object, who will be installing the artwork? Is it going to be library staff, a conservator, a professional art handler? Who will do the packing and unpacking? Is it a contractor, library or museum staff? Do they have the ability to do on-site framing? Do they have a conservator on staff? Will they employ a contract conservator? For insurance, Sarah and Christina will talk more about the particulars. As a conservator, I just make sure to just check the documents to make sure that they have it. In addition, you'd like to know who is conducting the condition assessment on their end. Is it an on-staff conservator, a contract conservator, the registrar, a courier? Personally, I always check to see if they have a conservator on staff. It's my own personal bias, and I'd like to know if I have a counterpart to speak to. The facilities report should also include a list of past exhibits and lenders. It will give you a sense of how often they do these types of exhibits and who they've worked with in the past. I've also put up the American Alliance of Museums website. They have a standard facilities report that you can take a look at. After the loan is improved in concept, you'll need to advise on the light levels, mounts, and establish any shipping or exhibits requirements that need to be included in the loan agreement. Light levels can vary depending on the type of material that are going to be put on display. A good resource is the Museum Environment by Gary Thompson. The NEDCC also has a pamphlet about lighting that explains the idea of lux hours. If the light will be 50 lux for 100 days, then the exposure to your item will be about 50,000 lux hours. Depending on how light sensitive your material is, you may want to limit the amount of light that it is exposed during the course of the exhibit. 50 lux is generally agreed upon as the baseline for paper material. Generally speaking, stone paintings and metal have a higher lux level. The general guidelines are: for light-sensitive material like paper, textile, leather, and books, 50 lux. For moderately light-sensitive material like oil, acrylic paint, or composite inorganic objects, about 150 lux. For the least light-sensitive material like stone, ceramic, metal, or glass, about 300 lux. The new Museum Registration Methods book also holds more information. You can check the light levels at your own institution with a light meter. The UV light also needs to be kept at a minimum. UV light breaks down paper fibers and causes chemical reactions. You want to keep it as low as possible. Glass can be coated with UV film. Filters can be placed over lights. There are multiple ways to mitigate UV exposure. If we go back to the facilities report, they should include some information on how they mitigate UV light. Other recommendations that need to be made is how to exhibit your item. These posters were mounted using magnets. There was a mylar barrier placed between the magnet and the poster to aid in the magnet's removal and lessen the strength of the magnet, and also to keep the magnet from depositing any smudges or other debris on the paper. If it's a paper item, does your object need to be matted, and who will do the matting? Will it be you or the borrower? If it's done by your institution, the benefit is that you can create the type of mount that you prefer. Generally, I prefer using non-adhesive methods to mount paper objects whenever possible. If the borrowing institution is going to mount the object, then detailed instruction on how and what material can be used should be included. I would also strongly recommend that an experienced preparator, or preferably a conservator, does the mounting. For books, you can make the mount and have it shipped to the borrowing institution along with your book and instructions on how to mount it. So for conservation, a conservator should examine the object and, working with the curator, discuss any concerns about its display. This may mean that time and money needs to be allocated for the object to be treated. It can be as simple as a cleaning or a minor mend, or something much more extensive. An in-house conservator or one in private practice can put a treatment proposal together for you. A condition report or a condition book is a document that travels with the loan item. It consists of both a written description and photo documentation. The report can be 1 or 2 pages depending on the type of object. Photos are good to include because they can be marked up. It is very important to document your item prior to it leaving your institution. A condition report is different from a conservation treatment report. The condition report establishes the state of the object is in prior to it leaving your institution and upon its return. It should identify any areas that may be problematic, weak, or require special handling, such as tears, flakes, or cracks. You should also have photographic and written instruction on how to pack your item, even with a courier. Speaking from experience, especially if the item is traveling overseas, photos can go a long way in explaining what you would like to have done. At the time of packing, it may seem obvious. However, months will pass before it needs to be repacked, and it's amazing how the details can become a little fuzzy after 3 or so months. So here's an example of a condition form. Other examples can be found in the new museum registration books, and I have a list of reference books at the end of this presentation. The form needs to include 3 major sections: the identification of the object, the condition of the object, and the exhibition location. The identification section includes things like an accession number, a loan number, a bib number, your author, the date, the size of your object, the object's composition, any damage that it may have, and the extent of the damage and where it's located, any previous repairs, the examiner's date and name. The description and condition of the object, there's also a section for that, as well as housing and packing information. There's also a section for environmental and display conditions, if there are any limitations, such as the book only needs to be opened at 120 degrees, say. If it's going to multiple venues, it's also good to have incoming and outgoing sections, as well as a small area for any notes that you may want to have. A photograph should also accompany the object. For this sample, you can see there is a ID number, the title of the piece, the date the photograph was taken, a scale. This is a color bar. It's actually just a bonus feature. It's not necessary in this type of document, but it just happened to include it in this one. And also, the photograph is marked up. So you can see here there's a plate mark and 2 folds on this particular piece. So this is the state that it left to the building in, and when it's returned, you should check to see that the plate mark still exists and the 2 folds are still there, and also that there are no additional folds. So let's say that your item has been signed off on and it's ready to go. You'll need to box it. This can either be done by art handlers to create a box or by your in-house staff. A conservator can create a box for smaller items that need to be shipped or carried to the borrowing institution. This painting was borrowed from Northwestern Library by an overseas museum. It was packed by art shippers who also created the traveling crate. And you can see the painting and its box and the foam that surrounds it. So there are several documents that need to travel with your piece. A pro forma invoice allows the object to leave the building, a copy of the loan agreement. If you're serving as a courier, it's helpful to have a facilities report with you to confirm what the specs are. Where's the item going to be stored, confirm the type of security that is in place, and confirm the hanging instructions. So the condition report we just went over. So you need to decide, does your object need a courier? Each institution needs to have its own guidelines as to what items need a courier. Things you may want to consider are the value of the item, its rarity, its fragility, and the complications of the installation. The courier's job is to make sure that the item is safely transported to the borrower and to supervise the installation. He or she needs to be comfortable reviewing the condition report. You need to have a lot of patience. There's also quite a bit of waiting involved. The courier will stay with the object once it leaves the lending institution until it arrives at the borrowing institution. The courier will oversee the packing and unpacking, the transportation, go over the condition report, noting any changes, and supervise the installation. Your courier also needs to be able to communicate with your institution should something go wrong. Who is your contact? Is it the registrar, the curator? On this slide, we also have the Northwestern's checklist of items that a courier needs to bring with them. The preservation travel checklist is something that I've simply put together as my own little cheat sheet. It includes things like a repair kit. I would only recommend that if you're the conservator traveling, otherwise you don't want to be making repairs on the fly. A camera, a travel alarm clock, some hockey brushes, magnifiers, those types of items. So once your object is boxed, it should go through some sort of security measures. For domestic shipments, the box needs to be securely closed. Screws are fine for boxes. Do not use nails. They cause too much vibration and are difficult to remove. For international shipments, the screening needs to be done at an authorized facility, since the box can't be opened in an airport for customs inspection. This is how a crate is sealed and then stamped that it has been inspected. The tabs on the left can't be tampered with. So you can have anything from these types of tabs and a stamp to simply a tape that goes around the box. So Christina spoke yesterday on the different types of transportation that can be used. From a conservator's point of view, you want the fewest points that your object needs to be handled. It's better for it to go on a truck once and then arrive at the institution for unloading rather than having to switch trucks. The same goes for air travel. Better one plane than having layovers someplace. Once the box is securely closed, it's ready for shipment. For air travel, it would be wrapped on a pallet. For truck transport, it is strapped in. I would recommend 2 straps. You don't want it wobbling if you hit a bump. For storage after it arrives at the borrowing institution, it needs to be placed in a secure location in accordance with your lending agreement. The box should not be opened for a minimum of 24 hours so that your object has enough time to acclimate to the new environment. The courier, if one is needed, is going to oversee installation. Installation should be in accordance with your loan agreement. It should specify how the object is to be displayed. In this case, the painting had additional brackets that added some stability and some security hardware. For book or paper items, it would be verifying the page opening and the angle that the book is displayed. For these paper objects, they were backed with conservation-grade mat board and attached with photo corners. So this brings us to the end of my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, I have a question for you.
Sure.
What actions do you take if an item on loan comes back in a different condition than when it left your library?
That's a very good question. Well, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you do have that condition report that was sent out. That way you know exactly the condition that it was in prior to it leaving, and you have some documentation of what that was done. In that way, you both you and the lending institution sign off on it and agree that that was the condition that it arrived at their institution. If it arrives back to you and say has some additional damage, you do have some recourse because there is that documentation in place already. You would need to speak to the registrar on the other end and see what can be done to sort of help you do that. That could be anything from, you know, them agreeing to repair the item in some way. There's usually something in the loan agreement that addresses that. Without, I would strongly recommend the documentation, because without the pictures and the written report, there's no way to document that the damage happened at the lender's end rather than them having received it that way.
Is that something that you ever see happen with items that you've loaned?
I can't really, so we have had an instance where an item came down to the lab and the curator said that it was damaged while out on loan. However, we never saw the item prior to it going out on loan, so we never got a chance to document it or do an assessment. So there was very, other than his memory of it going out, there was no documentation for it. So that's why I would recommend getting the documentation done.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions for Tonia? Well, I have a question about packing items for shipment somewhere.
Sure.
If you have like a large painting or photograph that you're sending, do you ever pack more than one in a case to go, or are they each individually packaged?
You can pack more than one in a case to go. We have sent things in document boxes, and so there are several letters or items that can be placed in a single box. For paintings, you can also do the same. You can pack more than one in a particular box. For the painting that I showed on my slides, that one was so large that I would not put more than one in a box. It also weighs a ton, so I don't know that they would be able to move it. But for smaller paintings, I have seen more than one packed in a box. They tend to have almost trays placed inside the box, and so there's a lot of foam and then the trays separating each item and then more foam interleaving them. So it can be a secure way to send something. You don't need to put one item per box.
Okay, we have a question that came in. It says, is it acceptable to ask the curator or conservator at the borrowing institution to review the item upon receipt and or before it is shipped back?
Oh, definitely. That's actually standard practice. Let me go back. Let's see if I can go back. Oh, here we go. So in this, you can see when the You'll review the item before it leaves your institution. Once it arrives to the borrowing institution, they will also review the item. You'll review the item if there is a courier along with a representative at the borrowing institution. So it could be anybody that they have on their end, and the two of you will go over the item together. So once the condition is agreed upon, you will sign it. So you'll initial that you both agree on the condition of the item once it arrives at the institution. Once it's taken off exhibit, it's examined again by the borrower. If you have a courier, the courier will be there to examine the object with whoever is at the lending institution, and both of you will sign off on it again. This assessment should be done every time it goes on exhibit and it leaves exhibit. So it leaves your institution, you go through the report and sign it. Once it arrives at the borrower, you go through the report and sign it. It comes off exhibit, you go through the report and sign it again. When it comes back to your institution, you need to go through the report and sign it again. There's a lot of checking and double checking that at every stage, nothing has changed for your item.
Do we have any other questions? All right, that looks like looks like nobody else has any questions. So thank you, Tonia, for insight into preservation and conservation issues surrounding loan agreements.
Actually.
Oh, is there another one?
No, I just got a question here from the crowd on palleting. If your object is going to be on a pallet to go overseas, there is something you need to be aware of in that what else is on the pallet with your object. It could be when our painting went overseas, they packed it with a couple of other paintings and also clothes. That's very common for that to happen, not necessarily clothes, but other things to be on the pallet with you. It's a space measure for the airlines. What you need to make sure is that you don't have food. I have heard stories of people trying to get cans of olives on the pallet with them. That is a bad idea. So make sure that there's no food or any organic material that could be attract pests or anything like that. Make sure that it's pretty inert. So clothes, pretty safe bet, it's going to be fine, and as it serves an additional buffer. So just beware that the airline will try to put other stuff with your painting or books or other objects that you're traveling overseas.
How much control do you have over what the airline is going to put on the pallet?
You can request that they don't put that stuff on, and it will be honored. At the airline, you'll have a oh goodness, what's the word that I'm looking for? Who is our contact at through the shipper? What is that company that is called? You'll have an agent. You'll have a shipping agent that will also watch over the palleting with you. You can't actually see the pallet load onto the plane. They have an agent can actually, cause it's FAA regulations now, so they won't allow a courier to do that, but the agent will see it. So to answer your question, yes, you can request that they not put food on your pallet, and that will be honored. You just need to tell them.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, going once. All right. Then thank you, Tonia, for your insight into preservation and conservation issues surrounding loan agreements. Thank you also to all of our attendees. We hope you found today's session useful. You'll soon receive a short online evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to respond to the questions and return the form to us. Your comments are very valuable and help ALCTS to plan new continuing education offerings. I'd like to thank Katie Rissu, the organizer for this online pre-conference, as well as Amy Lana for providing technical support for today's webinar. The support she and our colleagues on the Continuing Education Committee's Technical Support Subcommittee provide make it possible for us to present these webinars smoothly. Information about all ALCTS webinars and continuing education events can be found on the ALCTS homepage at ala.org/ALCTS. There is one additional webinar as part of this pre-conference, tomorrow's A Case Study in Exhibition Loans, Northwestern University Library. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon, and we hope you will participate in other ALCTS events in the future.